What is up, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the 3&D here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Make sure you hit subscribe below and follow our socials at the 3&D ETB and at ETB Network. On tonight's episode, we'll be taking a look at the NBA trade deadline that went down past week, all the moves that went down, some of the teams who upgraded, some of the teams who downgraded, the Pistons and the Hornets completely entering a rehaul now, a couple of guys who got bought out where they signed. We'll have some women's college basketball news we'll be going over. And then, of course, the AP poll and top college games of the week will be coming up as well. We also want to introduce WolfSpreads as our new partner here on the channel. If you're interested in placing bets, but you don't want to put down your actual money, go to WolfSpreads, download it. You can play with your friends and play with your own pool. Put down as many bets as you want without having to risk losing anything, and compete and see which one of you guys, you and your friends, are the best gamblers. And especially before you put your money down, definitely get a good look at how accurate you are. So I hope everyone's doing well. NBA season was definitely in full swing throughout this past week with the NBA trade deadline going down. This upcoming weekend is going to be the NBA All-Star weekend, so that's going to be definitely exciting, as we'll have the three-point shootout, the slam dunk contest, all the different Rising Stars challenges, and, of course, the All-Star game. But the NBA trade deadline went down. The deadline was last Thursday, and a bunch of interesting moves for sure were ended up happening. A couple of guys that you didn't really expect to get traded ended up getting dealt. Some of the top moves around the deadline. The Pistons and Hornets made a ton of moves and completely rehauled their rosters. I mean, they're the two worst teams in the NBA, two of the worst teams in the NBA. I think the Spurs still technically might be either the worst or the second worst now, but those are still two of the worst teams in the NBA, and they made a ton of moves. One of the top moves was getting Simone Fontecchio from the Utah Jazz. So the Pistons got Fontecchio from the Jazz in exchange for Kevin Knox, who ended up being released, the draft rights to Gabriel Procida, and a 2024 second-round pick. So that was one of the trades that the Pistons ended up getting involved in. The Celtics added some depth as well. They ended up grabbing Xavier Tillman Sr. from the Memphis Grizzlies in exchange for Lamar Stevens and 2 second-round picks. Xavier Tillman's a great big man off the bench, a little bit of a bruiser. He's a decent scorer, but a good rebounder, good shot blocker. Could definitely help the bench for the Celtics during their playoff run. The Raptors also made a couple of interesting moves, including getting Kelly Olynyk and Ochai Agbaji from the Utah Jazz in exchange for Otto Porter Jr., Kira Lewis, and a 2024 first-round pick. So a first-round pick for this upcoming year. The main reason for doing this was to get Ochai Agbaji, who was drafted just a couple of years ago by the Utah Jazz. Was a fantastic 4-year player at Kansas. Hasn't really gotten a ton of time throughout his time with the Jazz, but now he's going to be headed to the Raptors. Raptors are entering a complete rebuild, and they're looking to bring in some young pieces. So they ended up trading a couple of their veteran guys to Otto Porter Jr., who they signed before last season, and Kira Lewis, who they got in part of the RJ Barrett trade, the 3-team trade. And they traded a first-round pick, too, for it. And Kelly Olynyk as well. Kelly Olynyk kind of has been a throw-in for the most part throughout like his entire career, like throughout trades and all that kind of stuff. But he's been a fantastic player, great big man, and yeah, he's I think Toronto kind of just brought him in so that way the Jazz can match up contracts, honestly. And Otto Porter Jr. and Kira Lewis aren't really the two of the most highly sought after guys for the Jazz. They're trying to get younger too. The main thing was getting that first round pick. I think was the most exciting thing for the Jazz in this situation. And then the Oklahoma City Thunder added some veteran leadership. They added Gordon Hayward in exchange for a few interesting pieces. So the Charlotte Hornets traded Gordon Hayward to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Hayward obviously signed that massive contract with the Hornets a few off seasons ago that kind of left a lot of people scratching their heads. That's set to expire this offseason. He'll be an unrestricted free agent. but the Thunder are going to get Gordon Hayward. In exchange, the Hornets get Trey Mann, who was drafted by the Thunder a couple years ago. Talented scorer, talented young guard. Wasn't getting much playing time with the Thunder this year, so we'll definitely get to see more opportunities with the Hornets. Vasilij Micic, who has been one of the better guards overseas the last several years. He just signed as a 30-year-old rookie with the Oklahoma City Thunder this offseason. Hasn't really played much. The Hornets now can try him out, see if they get anything. Davis Bertans, too, who's a veteran. They may just keep at the end of the bench. And 2 second-round picks they ended up getting. So, honestly, this was a good trade for both teams. I think the Thunder add Gordon Hayward, who is a good veteran to add to their young core for their playoff run, and to be able to come off the bench and possibly try to win a series or two too. Because Oklahoma City's been fantastic this year. They're still in the mix to be the number 1 seed in the Western Conference headed into the playoffs. And the Hornets ended up getting a lot of guys. Trey Mann could definitely become a centerpiece that they could possibly build around. Vasilij Micic could end up being a pretty solid piece. And then they got 2 second-rounders for it, too. Then the Dallas Mavericks ended up making a couple of moves as well, getting some veteran players. They snagged Daniel Gafford from the Washington Wizards in exchange for Richaun Holmes and a 2024 first-round pick. So they ended up trading a decent amount for Daniel Gafford, who's been starting for the Washington Wizards the last couple of years. Their starting center. Good rebounder, good scorer. He'll give them some big man depth, which they desperately needed. They picked up a couple of big men during the trade deadline, and they definitely needed some height. And Richaun Holmes wasn't playing much for them, and they traded a first-round pick for this year. And then the biggest one, I think this is probably the biggest trade of the entire deadline, was the New York Knicks getting Bojan Bogdanovic and Alec Burks from the Detroit Pistons in exchange for Quentin Grimes, Evan Fournier, Malachi Flynn, Ryan Arcidiacono, and 2 second-round picks. So the Knicks, right on the brink of being one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. They're sitting at 3 right now. They've had a fantastic season, obviously, the story being around Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle being all-stars, but they needed some depth. And Julius Randle's hurt right now. They've got a couple of guys who have been up and down, and Bojan Bogdanovic has been a great player his entire career. 20-point-per-game scorer. He's a knockdown shooter. Will be a great guy off the bench. And Alec Burks returns too, who played great for the Knicks for a couple of years that they had him. They ended up trading him to the Pistons. He played for the Pistons for like a year and a half, I believe it was. And now the Knicks will add him back on an expiring contract. Bogdanovic also has another year left on his contract, so that's big. They'll have him heading into next year. And they traded a few interesting pieces. Evan Fournier has an expiring contract. They had to get rid of him. Ryan Arcidiacono, Malachi Flynn were 2 guys at the end of the bench. But Quentin Grimes was the interesting one. He was obviously one of their better young pieces. And there was a lot of rumors about how he was growing impatient with the Knicks and annoyed about his playing time, all that kind of stuff. So he's getting dealt to the Detroit Pistons, and he'll definitely get to see a lot of playing time there. And then 2 second-round picks. So I thought that was a great trade for both teams. The Pistons ended up getting a good future piece with Grimes and 2 second-round picks in exchange for a couple of their veterans that they had stashed away for the deadline. Then the Raptors traded away Dennis Schroeder and Thaddeus Young to the Brooklyn Nets in exchange for Spencer Dinwiddie. This was pretty much a salary dump for the Raptors to get Schroeder and Thaddeus Young both off their roster, 2 veterans that they had no business holding on to anymore. So they end up dishing them off to Brooklyn to try to make a run at the playoffs for this year. And then in exchange, they got Spencer Dinwiddie, who they waived, and he subsequently signed with the Los Angeles Lakers. We'll be going over that in a few. And then another trade with the Mavericks and the Hornets. The Dallas Mavericks ended up getting PJ Washington from the Charlotte Hornets and 2 second-round picks for Grant Williams, Seth Curry, and a 2027 first-round pick. So this was a really interesting trade. Grant Williams, the Dallas just signed this offseason to a 4-year deal, gave him a lot of money, and apparently they grew pretty frustrated with him. And so they decided to quickly deal him. Seth Curry was another guy who wasn't getting much playing time. And they ended up bringing in PJ Washington, who a lot of people have seen as one of the better young big men in the league. And they also got 2 second-round picks as well from it. So the Mavericks ended up adding PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, which were 2 very, very solid big men. They needed big men badly. So they ended up getting that. And Seth Curry also returns to his hometown team. His dad played 10 years for the Charlotte Hornets. And both Seth Curry and Steph Curry grew up in the Charlotte area. Seth Curry is wearing his dad's number 30 for the Charlotte Hornets. Everybody, Steph Curry's been talking about his entire career, how it would be great to play in Charlotte to end his career or something. At this point, I don't think that's really ever going to happen, but it'll be interesting. Be interesting to see. And then a 3-team trade that went down for pretty much for some depth pieces. The Suns, I will be the first to admit that I praised the Suns for adding a ton of depth pieces this summer. A lot of those pieces did not end up working out and have not had really great years. So they decided to package some of those guys in a 3-team trade and bring in some new depth pieces. So the Suns added Royce O'Neal from the Brooklyn Nets and David Roddy, a young forward from the Memphis Grizzlies. The Memphis Grizzlies ended up getting Chimezi Metu, Yuta Watanabe, and a 2026 first-round pick. And the Brooklyn Nets ended up getting Keita Bates-Diop, Jordan Goodwin, and 3 second-round picks. The Grizzlies ended up releasing Chimezi Metu. The Nets ended up releasing Jordan Goodwin. They held on to Keita Bates-Diop. Grizzlies held on to Yuta Watanabe and obviously the first-round pick. And the Suns ended up getting 2 pretty good bench pieces with Royce O'Neal and David Roddy. And then in exchange of a couple of veterans, the Milwaukee Bucks ended up getting Patrick Beverley from the Philadelphia 76ers in exchange for Cameron Payne and a 2027 second-round pick. And then the final notable trade was the Philadelphia 76ers landed Buddy Hield in a 3-team trade that saw the Pacers end up getting Doug McDermott from the Spurs, Furkan Korkmaz from the Sixers, and 2 second-round picks. And the San Antonio Spurs ended up getting Marcus Morris from the 76ers and a second-round pick. The Spurs ended up releasing Marcus Morris, just held on the second-round pick, and the Pacers ended up releasing Furkan Korkmaz and held on to Doug McDermott and the 2 second-round picks, and the Sixers got Buddy Hield. So Buddy Hield was a little frustrated with the Pacers. He was coming off the bench, and he had been talking about requesting a trade since the offseason. So they found a good trade partner, sending him to the Philadelphia 76ers. He's also got an expiring contract. He's set to become a free agent after this season. So the Sixers will bring him in for the playoff run to see if they can spark any momentum. And that brings us over to the Pistons and the Hornets. You're going complete rehaul. So both the Pistons and the Hornets completely reset their rosters at the deadline. They're both 2 of the worst teams in the NBA, obviously, deep into rebuilds, especially the Pistons. I mean, we saw the Pistons with their historic, 27-game losing streak at one point this season. They've had a historically bad year, without a doubt, in the first year of Monty Williams taking over. So they dealt out anything that they could get something for. And that was a veteran piece that they didn't feel like they could build around. So the Pistons dealt Bojan Bogdanovic, Alec Burks, Danilo Gallinari, Monte Morris, Kevin Knox, and Kira Lewis Jr. They ended up releasing Killian Hayes, who was their first-round pick back in 2020 and has not played well throughout his career. They ended up releasing him, and they've released Joe Harris as well, who's another veteran that a playoff contender should be end up picking up. And they brought in a few interesting pieces. They brought in Quentin Grimes, Simone Fontecchio, Shake Milton, Troy Brown Jr., Malachi Flynn, and Evan Fournier. So Evan Fournier, Malachi Flynn, Troy Brown Jr., and Shake Milton all are veterans on expiring contracts. Those are guys that'll see some time for the Pistons, but will pretty much just wrap up their contract year with the Pistons this year and then hit free agency. But the 2 pieces really I think the Pistons are going to try to build around that they got in these trades is Quentin Grimes and Simone Fontecchio. Fontecchio is a second-year forward from the Jazz, great shooter. A lot of people had high hopes for him. They were saying good things about him. And the Pistons really fell in love with him. And then Quentin Grimes, too, is a great 2-way guard/forward. Young guy, obviously, 3rd year in the league. And on top of Grimes and Fontecchio, they also have Cade Cunningham, Jalen Duren, Jaden Ivey, and Asar Thompson on their roster that they're going to build around. So the Pistons have 6 young players that they're going to build around, and they're going to makeshift their roster any way they can, and they're going to try to add some depth in future drafts, possible future trades, all that kind of stuff. And then the Charlotte Hornets, on the other hand, also dealt away some stuff that they could get interesting pieces for. Gordon Hayward, PJ Washington, and Terry Rozier. They dealt out 3 veterans who all hold some decent value to a playoff contender. So they were able to deal all of those guys away. In exchange, they ended up bringing in Grant Williams, Trey Mann, Seth Curry, Davis Bertans, and Vasilij Micic. Seth Curry and Davis Bertans are both on expiring contracts. Those are good veterans that they'll probably let go. But Grant Williams just signed that 4-year deal with the Mavericks that the Hornets are now going to pick up. So he's going to be a piece of the Hornets' future now, Grant Williams. Trey Mann as well. They'll give him a decent shot. And then Vasilij Micic, too, who's a little bit of a question mark. They'll be trying out. And then obviously on their roster right now, they've got LaMelo Ball, Brandon Miller, Mark Williams, and Nick Smith Jr., who I think are 4 pieces that they can build around. Add Grant Williams, Trey Mann, and Vasilij Micic to that, and you got 7 guys on your roster that you can end up building around. So I think the Pistons have 6 guys that they like that they can try to build a team around, and I think the Hornets have about 7 guys that they like that they're going to try to do the same for. So it was a crazy trade deadline. I just recapped it all for you guys. So if you needed to catch up on all the trades and stuff, there you go. That's my 16-minute rant on the NBA trade deadline and the Pistons and Hornets basically completely rehauling their roster. So a couple of casualties from the deadline, though, ended up hitting the market and signed with the other team. Spencer Dinwiddie was the top one. So Spencer Dinwiddie signed with the Los Angeles Lakers. He was traded from the Brooklyn Nets to the Toronto Raptors and was waived during the trade deadline. Dinwiddie honestly immediately becomes a top scoring option for the Lakers. The Lakers are not having a great year. They're hovering right around 500. They're barely in the play-in mix as it is right now, and they've been getting some inconsistent play from a lot of their depth pieces like D'Angelo Russell, Rui Hachimura, and all those guys. They have not been getting consistent play out of any of those guys. So Spencer Dinwiddie is going to come in and could very well become their starting point guard, and might end up being one of their top players one of their top players outside of LeBron and Anthony Davis, especially on the scoring side too. So I think that Dinwiddie was testing the waters a little bit. He was considering going back to the Dallas Mavericks. He was considering a couple of other teams as well, but this one kind of suits him a little bit better because this is probably where he'll get the best opportunity, because they desperately need a 3rd, 4th, 5th scoring option outside of LeBron and Anthony Davis. Austin Reeves had a great year, but they haven't got much outside of that. And Dinwiddie can step in and basically become exactly that right off the bat for the Lakers. So that was a good pickup. And then Kyle Lowry ended up getting bought out by the Charlotte Hornets. He was traded about a month ago from the Miami Heat to the Charlotte Hornets in the Terry Rozier trade. He sat on the Hornets bench for about a month without ever playing or suiting up for a game. They finally bought him out of his contract. He only had a year left of his contract anyway, and he's going to set to sign with the Philadelphia 76ers to make a playoff run with them. This is his hometown team. He's a Philadelphia kid. He played at Villanova, so he's Philly through and through. He's always dreamed of playing for the 76ers at some point of his career. So now he finally gets to, which is an awesome opportunity for him. He'll definitely be one of their top guys off the bench. They add him and Buddy Hield too, which were 2 very good pieces to add, 2 expiring contracts that'll help them in their run. I mean, they're going to need something because Joel Embiid is going to be out for practically the entire season. At least the entire regular season. I don't think they completely ruled him out for the entirety of the playoffs as well or anything like that, but he's going to be out a long time and probably pretty much the rest of the regular season. So they're going to need something to hold it down if they want to try to stay out of the play-in tournament and possibly make a run in the playoffs as well. So they had a couple of veterans, which is good. So jumping over from the NBA, that's enough NBA news for you guys. Not too many games going on this week. We'll have NBA All-Star Weekend this weekend, which is always a fun time live from Indiana. So everybody go check that out. Three-point contest. Three-point contest has always been my favorite, to be honest with you. My favorite part of NBA All-Star Weekend has always been the three-point contest. If I can't watch anything else of the All-Star Weekend, I make sure I watch the three-point contest every year. That's my thing. Could be because I was a three-point shooter growing up, playing basketball. I don't know exactly what it is. I've always liked the slam dunk contest, but as a lot of NBA fans will tell you, over the years it's gotten extremely repetitive. Everybody's practically done all the big dunks that you can do at this point, so it's not. To me, it's not that entertaining anymore. And also, no stars really playing it. Jaylen Brown's going to play in it this year, but Mac McClung's going to be back in it. Jacob Toppin from the Knicks, who's on a 2-way contract, will be in it. But the 3-point shootout is loaded with talent. Jalen Brunson's going to be in it. Tyrese Halliburton's going to be in it. You got a lot of stars who are going to be in the 3-point shootout this year. And Sabrina Ionescu and Steph Curry are going to do their own little one-on-one 3-point shootout too, which I think is going to be a really cool thing to see. So I'm excited to see that too. But speaking of Sabrina Ionescu, we'll jump into a little women's basketball, women's college basketball. Caitlin Clark only 8 points away from breaking the women's college basketball scoring record all time. Obviously, Caitlin Clark has been the talk of women's basketball, whether it's WNBA or college. She's the star from Iowa. She's had an absolutely incredible 4-year career at Iowa. She's a senior this year, and she's extremely fun to watch play. But she's only 8 points away from breaking the record. Sunday on Fox was they televised the Iowa versus Nebraska game. And they had a little tracker. She needed 39 points to break the record, and she ended up only with 31 points in that game. So she's set to break the record easily. I mean, she'll easily score 8 points in their next game. So she'll be set to break the record Thursday night at home against Michigan. The other game on Sunday was in Nebraska, so it'll be nice. It'll be at her home arena. She'll end up being able to beat Kelsey Plum's record that she set back in 2017. Kelsey Plum, obviously a WNBA star. She was a 4-year star at the University of Washington, where she set the women's college basketball scoring record. Caitlin Clark, 8 points away from doing that, and she should be able to end up. She's got a good chunk of the season left too, and I'm sure she'll leave after this season to join the WNBA since she's a senior. Or she could end up returning for a 5th year since all these people get 5th-year eligibility. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you basketball fans saw Gilbert Arenas and Tamika Catchings. Cheryl Swoops, not Tamika Catchings. Gilbert Arenas and Cheryl Swoops on Gilbert Arenas' podcast saying how Caitlin Clark doesn't deserve the record because she had an extra year of eligibility. When if they actually did their research, they would realize that she hasn't used her 5th-year eligibility. She's in her 4th year. She's a true senior. So it literally made no sense. I find Gilbert Arenas hilarious. I think he's a hilarious dude, but some of the cuts from his podcast are just really bad and just show how little research they actually do. I mean, something like that is crazy. If you're going to go on to a podcast, you're going to go on to a famous podcast like that, and especially criticize a player, you got to make sure you've got all the facts. You have to have all the stats by your side. You've got to have a nice little cheat sheet. You can't be getting caught like that. And that's exactly what they did, saying that it shouldn't count because she did it in 5 years when she didn't do it in 5 years. This is her 4th year. But anyway, she's only 8 points away from setting the record. She'll end up getting a nice chunk between her and Kelsey Plum when it's all said and done, because she's got a good chunk of the regular season left in her senior year, and then March Madness for women's college basketball will add to her scoring title. And if she decides to return for a 5th year, I'm not even sure if that's under consideration for her, but if she were to decide, she'd further annihilate that record to a point where it would be very, very difficult for anybody to break it in 4 years, let alone 5 years if she were to decide to do that, but I don't think so. I think she's supposed to be the first overall pick in the WNBA draft this upcoming year before the season starts. Usually the WNBA draft's in April, I believe, and the season starts in June. So I think she's set to be the first overall pick, so I'm sure she'll be headed to the WNBA after this. So jumping over from women's college basketball, we'll jump into men's. And the new AP poll dropped today. So since we're doing the episode, obviously because of the Super Bowl, let's go Chiefs, first of all. Kansas City Chiefs winning back-to-back Super Bowl titles. We're doing this episode, recording it on a Monday. It's going live on a Tuesday night. So the beauty of recording it on a Monday is that we have the fresh new AP poll that just dropped. And some interesting stuff. A lot of movement in this week's AP poll. Including the top 5. Houston jumped from 5 to 3 this week. Marquette had a huge win against St. John's. They jumped 3 spots because of that win. They only had 1 game this week. They jumped from 7 to 4. And also partly because a few teams fell out. North Carolina had a bad loss to Clemson. They ended up falling 4 spots because of it, from 3 to 7. Iowa State has been on a roll. They jumped up from 14 to 10. South Carolina is mulling through the SEC right now. They're now the second best team in the SEC behind Tennessee. They jump up 4 more spots this week from 15 to 11. This is only their 3rd week being ranked top 25, and they're already up to 11 in this week's top 25. Dayton moves all the way up to 16 even after their loss. They still continue to move up. Wisconsin's been on a free fall. A couple of teams that have been on a free fall, Wisconsin and Kentucky. Wisconsin fell from 11 to 20 this week, and Kentucky fell 5 spots from 17 to 22. So both those teams, Wisconsin's lost 4 straight games. Kentucky lost another bad one this week and has just been inconsistent. So they're both on the verge of falling out of the top 25 if they don't get themselves together this week. And then Indiana State makes their season debut in the AP poll. They join as at number 23 this week. Florida Atlantic fell 4 spots after a tough loss from 20 to 24. But Indiana State has been one of the talks of college basketball, one of the better mid-majors in the country this year. Robbie Avila, you might have seen memes about him. He looks like a normal rec league big man, but he's one of college basketball's best players, and he's been a star for Indiana State this year, making them jump up to 23 this week. Oklahoma also rejoined the top 25 after being out of it a couple weeks at 25. And then a few Mountain West teams fell out of the top 25. Utah State, San Diego State, and New Mexico, who were all ranked last week, are now unranked this week. And Texas Tech also fell out of the top 25 after being ranked last week. So plenty of movement this week. There was a lot of upsets, a lot of bad losses, a lot of good wins for some teams. So there was definitely a lot of movement throughout the top 25. And that jumps us right into the last segment, top college games of the week for the week of February 13th. Obviously, this is debuting Tuesday, so we're not going to go over the Monday games, but leading off our schedule, we have Tuesday night at 9 o'clock, number 25 Oklahoma at number 12 Baylor. A nice Big 12 showdown going down Tuesday night at 9 o'clock on ESPN2. Oklahoma just rejoined the top 25 this week, 18-6 on the season, 6-5 in Big 12 play. They beat BYU and Oklahoma State this week to get themselves back in the top 25. Javian McCollum has still been the star player, averaging 14.2 points, 3.4 assists, and Otega Owe averaging 12.5 points and 4.2 rebounds. Baylor, on the other hand, remains at the top. They're 17-6 on the season, 6-4 in conference play. They beat Texas Tech this week, but they lost to Kansas on Saturday. They've won 3 of their last 4. They were falling a little bit a couple weeks ago. They free fell, but they're all the way back up to 12 now in the country this week. Jacoby Walter, one of the best freshmen in the nation, still their leading scorer at 14.3 points. And Eve Meese, who's also been a great freshman, potential first-round pick as well, averaging 11 points and 5.9 rebounds. And then an SEC showdown at this exact same time, Tuesday night at 9 o'clock on ESPN. We have Ole Miss at number 22 Kentucky. Kentucky has been falling a bit, so this is a big game for them. Ole Miss is 18-5 on the season. They're 5-5 now in conference play. They've fallen a bit since being ranked. They lost to both Auburn and South Carolina last week. So put together two ranked losses, but those would have been big games to win. Matthew Morrell still leading them, scoring 16.8 points, and Alan Flanagan leading as the second leading scorer at 15.7 points. And then Kentucky, on the other hand, 16-7 on the season. They're 6-4 in SEC play. They've lost 4 of the last 6, including a non-conference game, a strange non-conference game against Gonzaga on Saturday. They ended up losing that game. Rob Dillingham has been fantastic all season long, potential top 5 pick, averaging 15 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. And Reed Shepherd averaging 12.4 points, 4.3 rebounds, and 4.1 assists. And then wrapping off the Tuesday slate, we have a Mountain West game between 2 unranked teams. One team who I think should be ranked this week, New Mexico at Nevada, Tuesday night at 11 o'clock on CBS Sports Network. New Mexico was ranked 25 last week. They lost 2 of their last 3. They're 19-5 on the season, 7-4 in Mountain West play. They lost 2 of their last 3, and including losing to UNLV on Saturday, which knocked them out of the top 25. But regardless, they're still a tough team. Donovan Dent averaging 15.9 points, 5.7 assists. Jalen House averaging 15.7 points, and Jamal Mashburn Jr. averaging 15.2 points. And then Nevada, who I think had 2 huge ranked wins last week and still somehow didn't make it in the top 25. I thought they should have made it in the top 25 this week. They're 19-5 on the season. They're 6-4 in conference play. They beat Utah State and San Diego State this past week. Both of those losses ended up kicking both those teams out of the top 25. Jared Lucas has been amazing, averaging 16.9 points, and Keenan Blackshear averaging 15.9 points, 4.8 rebounds, and 4.6 assists. And then another SEC showdown going down on Wednesday at 8:30 on SEC Network. Number 11 South Carolina at number 13 Auburn. This is going to be a really good game. This is one of the better games of the week that I'm excited for. South Carolina, like we were saying before, 21-3 on the season, 9-2 in conference play. They're on a 7-game win streak right now. 2 of their biggest wins in that win streak was against Kentucky and Tennessee, which obviously catapulted them all the way up to 11. And one of the most underrated players in the nation, Michi Johnson, is their leading scorer, averaging 14.1 points and 4.2 rebounds. Auburn, on the other hand, has been rolling, 19-5 on the season, 8-3 in conference play. They beat Alabama this past week, but they lost to Florida on Saturday. They're still ranked 13th in the nation. Janai Broom averaging 16 points and 8.6 rebounds, and Jalen Williams averaging 13 points and 5 rebounds. So this is going to be a really good game. I'm excited to see it. See if South Carolina can keep their 7-game win streak alive, push it to 8 games, and see how for real they are. If they can knock off Kentucky, Tennessee, and Auburn all in that stretch. And then during the Saturday slate, the Saturday at 12 o'clock p.m., we have Texas Tech at number 10 Iowa State on ESPN Plus. Texas Tech 17-6 on the season, 6-4 in conference play. They lost to Baylor this past week. But they beat UCF on Saturday, ended up falling out of the top 25. They'll also be playing Kansas on Monday, which is going to be a huge game for them. Pop Isaac's been the leading scorer at 16.9 points a game. And then Iowa State, on the other hand, jumping all the way up to number 10 this week after beating both Texas and TCU. They're 18-5 on the season, 7-3 in Big 12 play. Keshawn Gilbert has been their leading scorer at 13.9 points, 4.7 rebounds. Tamon Lipsey has been fantastic, averaging 13.2 points, 5.6 assists, 5 rebounds. And Milan Momcilovic, averaging one of the best freshmen in the nation, averaging 12.6 points. So Iowa State has been fantastic. They're going to try to hold on as they host Texas Tech. And then another Big 12 game Saturday at 1 o'clock on CBS. We have Texas at number 3 Houston. Texas 16-8 on the season. They're 5-6 now in conference play. They lost to Iowa State this past week, but they also beat West Virginia on Saturday. Max A. Smith, their leading scorer, 17.7 points, and Dylan Disu, averaging 16.9 points and 1.4 steals. And then Houston, on the other hand, jumped from 5 to 3 this week on the AP poll after beating both Oklahoma State and Cincinnati. This past week, they're 21-3 now on the season, 8-3 in conference play in their first season in the Big 12. They were in the American Conference for years before that. and they've had no problem jumping into one of the powerhouse conferences in college basketball. They're the best team in the Big 12. Still, LJ Cryer leading them in scoring at 14.8 points, and Jamal Sheed averaging 12.7 points, 5.8 assists. And then by far the best game of the week, we have the two best teams in the Big East going head-to-head. Number 4, Marquette at number 1, UConn. Saturday at 3 o'clock on Fox. This is going to be an awesome game. Marquette is 18-5 on the season, 9-3 in conference play. They're on a 7-game win streak right now. They beat St. John's on Saturday. They'll be playing Butler on Tuesday, so they should be on an 8-game win streak headed into this game. Tyler Kolek, last year's Big East Player of the Year, has been absolutely fantastic. Went off against St. John's, averaging 15.6 points and 7.5 assists. And Oso Ighodaro, obviously having a great year too, averaging 14 points and 7 rebounds. And UConn, on the other hand, has been the number 1 team in the nation for several weeks now. They're 22-2 on the season. They're 12-1 in Big East play. They're on a 12-game win streak. They'll be playing DePaul on Wednesday, who's one of the worst teams in the country. So that should easily be a 13-game win streak headed into Saturday. Cam Spencer has been one of the talks of college basketball, one of the best transfers in the nation, coming over and leading them and scoring at 15.2 points and 4.6 rebounds. Tristan Newton has done a little bit of everything, also averaging 15.2 points, but averaging 6.6 rebounds and 5.8 assists. And Stephon Castle as well has become one of the better freshmen in the nation, becoming a solidified first-round pick, averaging 10.9 points, 4.4 rebounds, and 3.1 assists. And then a Big 12 showdown. We got number 6 Kansas at number 25 Oklahoma. So Oklahoma's got 2 big games that we have noted. Saturday, this one's Saturday at 4 o'clock on ESPN. Kansas 19-5 on the season. They're ranked 6th this week, 7-4 in conference play. They lost to Kansas State this past week, which hurt them, but then they beat Baylor, which was a really good win. They'll also be playing Texas Tech on Monday, so we'll see how that goes. Kevin McCullough and Hunter Dickinson have still been 2 of the best players in the nation for them this year. And then an SEC game, 2 teams we already went over, number 22 Kentucky at number 13 Auburn, Saturday at 6 o'clock on ESPN. Not too much to say about that. And then the final game, we got to give some love to number 24 ranked Florida Atlantic in the American Conference. Number 24 Florida Atlantic at South Florida, Sunday at 12 o'clock noontime on ESPN. This is going to be a really good game. South Florida has been one of the better teams in the nation this year. Florida Atlantic, though, is ranked 24. They're 19-5 on the season, 9-2 in conference play. Beat Wichita State on Sunday, but they lost to UAB on Thursday, which was just their second conference loss. They'll also be playing Temple on Thursday, so they'll have another game before this. Janelle Davis has been fantastic, averaging 18.6 points, 6.8 rebounds, and Vlad Golden has been their star big man, averaging 14.2 points and 6.9 rebounds. And then South Florida, on the other hand, has been one of the sneaky teams of college basketball. They're 17-5 on the year. They're 10-1 now in conference play. They're in first place in the American ahead of Florida Atlantic. They're on a 9-game win streak right now. They've won 15 of their last 16, and a couple of those wins were against Memphis and Wichita State, were 2 of their better wins. Chris Youngblood's been their leading scorer, 15 points, and Selton Miguel also averaging 14.5 points and 3.3 rebounds. So that's the game I'm very excited for. That's a low key, arguably the best game of the weekend right there. I mean, Marquette UConn is definitely going to be the best game of the weekend, but you can make a tough argument about South Florida and Florida Atlantic being one of the tougher showdowns in the entire weekend slate. So I'm definitely excited about that, and that is the top college games of the week for this week of February 13th. So that'll do it for another episode of the 3&D. I want to thank everyone for tuning into the Empty the Bench Podcast Network for another episode. Once again, make sure you like and subscribe to this channel and follow the social at the 3&D ETB. We'll be putting out content all week in case you missed the entire episode. It will be showing out all the highlights and everything that you might have missed. Hope everyone has a great night. Make sure to like and subscribe to Empty the Bench on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Have a good night, everybody.